how to lose weight and do it correctly, the truth about habits, how and why we form them, how to create a goal structure to help you lose weight or obtain a desired healthier lifestyle and body. Yo bar, what's up and what's happening? And in today's episode, I'm going to be telling you the truth about habits, how you can master any habit formation, how to grow a habit and also keep it. In most circumstances, habits are proven to return with ease once the process is repeated over and over again. However, it takes longer to produce good habits, or what we perceive as good habits, that affect us in a productive way or increase our ability to improve or to achieve more. There are a few things that we all want in life. And one of those things is that we want to be able to formulate better habits that work for us so that we can improve and also grow. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, bad or unfavourable habits are often the easiest ones to develop. They are easily formed, easier to repeat, and they are more than likely to be detrimental to you, your health, and also your lifestyle. Even outside sources such as social behavior, your surroundings, the environment in which you find yourself in will all affect your habit formation. Whether you're able to make or break a habit, those things also come into account. And that's what I'm going to be discussing with you today. Like, subscribe, and comment below. Enjoy. Okay, play the intro. Come on. Food for thought. We all feel like we want something new, a goal, if you like. But this ambition to achieve needs habits and drive to feed your goal. And this new idea or goal invigorates thoughts in your mind of how you're going to change. But our nervous system is not built to adapt or to reinvent itself just because we like the idea that we want to change. Because a feeling is not an action. A feeling or an idea is an emotion that helps create drive towards the action. We need to change our behavior so that we can change the way we think, act, perceive, and do. Welcome to the world of habitual learning. Question: what is a habit? To form a habit takes a number of things. And the author, James Clear, describes these in 4 categories or progressive steps. And these steps to be able to formulate a habit are noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. However, these 4 steps are often interrupted by certain blocks that tend to hinder our development to be able to progress with a habit. So often when you're trying to create a habit, you're trying to create a habit that is going to be beneficial to you. So the steps that you're trying to create are often going to be steps that are going to be healthy, helpful, positive, or impactful or beneficial to your life. So you, the individual, need to be supported with tools in order to be able to formulate these habits. And how to find and use these tools to your benefit, I'll discuss later. Now, let's take a person who's trying to create a habit in a more negative environment, where the individual has opposed problems, which possibly could be personal, professional, environmental, social, or even problems at home. These individuals who are possibly trying to break an old habit and create a new habit are going to find it very difficult to be able to achieve their desired outcome without the right tools and without integrating the correct plan. Okay, so let's imagine that you're on a journey, and your journey is to drive to my house. And the reason you're driving to my house is at the end of the journey, I always have cookies waiting for you. However, the journey to get to my house is actually quite complicated and you have to follow a map. And therefore, you have to take your time to be able to get to my house so you don't end up in the wrong location. So when you get to my house, you eat the cookies and I say to you, look, there's going to be more cookies here tomorrow if you want to come back. And so you say, yeah, sure, I'd love to come back to eat more cookies. So you travel the journey again to get to my house so that you can eat cookies. But one of the differences is that you actually cut your time down. The first time it took you an extended amount of time because you didn't want to make a mistake on the journey. But the second time you actually knew the journey a little bit better to be able to get to my house. So every single time you travel to my house, the journey becomes easier and easier. You cut down the time and you also remember the route in which you have to travel. So thinking back to the initial journey and then traveling that same route, let's say a dozen times, everything becomes a lot more automated. Everything becomes a lot easier. But what is actually going on is that you are learning a new habit and your brain is having to work less and less because it doesn't have to remember quite so much as it did the first time it took that journey. The learning process has become automated. But that is not the only reason why you have developed a habit. The reason why you've developed a habit is because there is an incentive there of cookies at the end of the journey. So even if the journey is difficult to be able to get to my house, at the end there is a reward. And that habit is going to be kind of difficult to break because there is a reward at the end of the journey. By the way, I'm a fitness professional. I would never offer you cookies in a million years.
It's the yoga series.
These are some notes you probably need to take. So grab a pen or ask somebody to remember for you. Everybody wants an improvement. Everybody wants to see a radical transformation. But what we fail to realize is that small differences and micro changes in our lifestyle are affecting us every single day. Taking the stairs and not the elevator. It could be something as simple as parking your car a little bit further away so that you have to walk a little bit further every single time you get inside your car. Something as simple as that. Just micro changes. A habit is nothing more than a good or a bad pattern that the individual repeats on a regular basis. This could be daily, it could be within a certain time frame, or it could be whenever the pattern is required. This regularity of a habit could be daily, it could be within a certain time frame, or it could be something as simple as a pattern that is required every single time the individual performs it. Question: how do we break old habits and how do we create new ones? So by nature, when we create a new habit, we have this image in our mind of what we want to be able to achieve, what we would like to fulfill, how we picture ourselves achieving that goal. We create this picture which offers us a dimension into the future. And it allows our mind to be able to depict ourselves in that future. And in that future, our goal has been achieved. And it is very much us within that image in the future, our own personal fulfillment of a want or a need. But in reality, to be able to get that image to become something that's actually happened or something that is actually tangible, it's actually a lot harder and takes stages, and it also takes planning to get to that end result. However, I never said that that was an impossibility. It is very much a power that you possess. You do possess the power to be able to plan ahead and start making steps towards achieving that goal. But the only way that you're going to be able to achieve that goal is obviously by learning skills or being able to use tools to be able to get there. And also it's going to take a plan in how you're going to do that. That goal might be something as very simple as weight loss, but weight loss isn't just necessarily going to happen on its own. It needs a plan, it needs structure, and it needs you to be able to create miniature habits so that you formulate better habits in order to be able to achieve the end goal or the end result. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to build a foundation of tools, small habits, and a plan so that you can build towards your future self. In your mind's eye, your future self is definitely sufficient, is more equipped to overcome obstacles, and generally just better. And within that, we all have the power to change our lives. We want to be able to develop a belief system that works solely for us. This belief system is fueled by that dream, and it is empowered by habit formation. So inside your brain is your frontal cortex. And one of the jobs of the frontal cortex is to be able to receive feedback and create a plan. However, that feedback needs to come from you, and they really come from the choices or things that you do. So if you repeat a bad cycle of something, say you're always eating bad junk food, that really is the only information that the frontal cortex is gathering, and therefore that plan is just to go to the shop and buy another chocolate bar. What you need to be able to do is you've seen a picture or you've imagined something in your mind, you've imagined yourself in the future with this new habit or this new goal or the thing that you have desired to be or to become. The frontal cortex needs information to be able to design something for you so that you can get there. And the way that that's going to happen for you is that you start to implement micro or small habits every single day. So to summarize, what our brain is looking for is looking for feedback. Once you have feedback, then you have more information. And with that information, you can start to formulate yourself a plan to be able to create a habit. And by creating that habit will get you closer to that image or that picture that you have of yourself in your mind's eye.
It's the Yoba series.
So we can't grow a successful habit unless we plan. If we don't have the successful habit, then we don't learn what does and doesn't work for us as individuals. So quite literally, what may work for one person may not necessarily work for you. Habit formation through desire. Let's look at habit formation in a nutshell. What do we want and what do we desire? So let's look at the first step of a habit, desire. Desire can be goal-driven. It can be an affirmation or something that you wish or want to believe in. It gives you stimulation when you think about it, and it can also be a driver to want to create and form new habits to be able to achieve your end goal or your end result. It also works well as a belief system and something that you can aim to change. So there is always going to be an initial trigger. That trigger is going to make you want or desire that goal, that end result. As the saying goes, we are all creatures of habit, and asking a person not to dream, not to imagine their goal is actually kind of difficult. What they want to do is they want to imagine themselves at the end result. But when we're creating new habits, what we want to do is we want to start at the beginning. And that bit is, well, not much fun. But your desire to create change often comes from a movement, fact, or information. Perhaps it comes from another perspective, or perhaps even just a reason or an idea to become better. And these are all very natural desires. These desires are forcing your want to become an actual goal. And that is what we notice. What we notice is we want something, and by definition, what we want to do is make a change because we desire. And for whatever reason that may be, that end result or that goal needs to have a habit and a plan to be able to get there, to be able to achieve that overall want. Think about what you want, and you immediately start thinking of the goal as your end result. For example, imagine what I'll look like when I eventually lose that weight, once I can gain that muscle and shred that fat. However, your want has created a need or a desire, and in your head you formulate a goal. And that's all very well and good, but you need to be able to start at the beginning of your journey. Imagining what you want is absolutely fine, and of course that creates a goal, but what you really need to do is you need to find a focus. You need to focus in, zone in on what you actually need to do to be able to begin your journey towards your goal.
It's the Yoba series.
So let's look at focus, and let's take just one of those elements that it takes to start a beginning of a goal. Let's take motivation, for example. What motivates you? What is going to give you drive to be able to get to your end goal, but also what's going to give you drive to start creating a habit? What do you need? What do you want? Well, you should already know what your motivation is. I can't tell you that, otherwise it wouldn't be yours. But what I can tell you is that your motivation, which is basically, let's say, like your willpower, needs to have a structured approach. It needs to have a plan to be able to make the habit become an actual reality. If it doesn't actually ever become a plan or a reality, really all it is just a dream or an affirmation. And that affirmation or dream is fine, but they're not actually going to help you start a plan, start a structure into being able to do repetitions to building up into an actual habit. Again, once you've done the habit, you can then start driving towards the goal. So now you have this feeling, perhaps in your chest or just in your mind's eye, and that is motivation. But along with motivation, there is really another important ingredient within this mix, and that is clarity. Clarity is key to motivation because you don't just feel like doing a habit. It's something that you have to structure, and you have to be able to devise a way of how you're going to start that habit. So I want to be able to learn to play that instrument that's sitting there in my bedroom and never does actually get played, or I want to be able to run that 10K marathon that I've always told myself that I could do. Those things are great, but they are actually your goals. What you want to be able to do is to be able to start a plan, create a structure. Otherwise, you're never actually going to be able to start at your beginning. What I teach my clients is to create a to-do list, and that list helps them to start the habit. The to-do list consists of three things: when, where, and how. When should the habit take place? Every day, every time you train, every time you eat, sleep, or anything that is a trigger to begin the cycle of that habit formation. Where would you form a new habit? Somewhere that triggers your mind to focus and perhaps create that repetition over and over again to make the habit more automated. How could you start forming a new habit? For example, a really easy way to think of it is that if you wanted to read more, you could place a book on your pillow or on your mattress just before you go to sleep. So when you get into bed, the book is waiting there for you, and you think to yourself, yeah, I could read a paragraph, I could read a page, and slowly but surely you start to get into the habit of doing that thing. You need to be able to formulate a plan to create a new habit. What people find really difficult to be able to start or create a new habit is that they are looking for a way to create a trigger. And that trigger needs to come from a place of repetition. And that repetition at the beginning may be slightly uncomfortable. It might be even mentally very strenuous. But nonetheless, it has to start, but it doesn't have to be quite as hard as you think it might be. So let's take that word repetition. Repetition literally means repeating over and over again. And so what I mean is that people are trying to find a trigger, something to click them into that habit. And you need to be able to set up small traps, if you like, to trap yourself into the habit. So you have to start it. You have to start doing it to be able to generate the initial phase of that habit. To force a habit often comes from a need or a want to change. For instance, you can't force something that needs repetition involved over and over again without having a plan. Without a plan, you may start the idea to create a new habit and you realize that repetition is the thing that you need to do. However, if you don't repeat that cycle enough times, all of that effort that you're trying to create a new habit without a plan and just repeating the same cycle without it actually evolving into the next thing it's supposed to will just end up with poor results and you feeling like you haven't achieved anything. The energy and enthusiasm it takes to make a successful habit is completely fruitless if your effort is to just get to the end result. Unless your willpower is phenomenally high for whatever reason, it's less than likely that you'll stick to a habit that needs repetition, repetition, and repetition if you don't formulate a plan. But a well laid out plan doesn't always work out.
It's the Yo-Bossy.
The energy and enthusiasm it takes to make a successful habit is completely fruitless if your effort is to just get to the end result. Unless your willpower is phenomenally high for whatever reason, it's less than likely that you'll stick to a habit that needs repetition, repetition, and repetition if you don't formulate a plan. But a well laid out plan doesn't always work out. Life happens, and that is why I have created this next phase for this video. Imagine that you want to lose 3 kilos. Sounds simple enough, but you need to be able to create a habit in order for you to achieve the goal. But you don't know where you need to start, and your goal needs to have a start. So before you make a commitment to the goal, let's step forward in time for a moment. Let's imagine that you wanted to lose that 3 kilos within 6 months. And let's also imagine that that goal to lose that weight in those 6 months has failed. But why did it fail? What you need to be able to do is you need to be able to write down a list of things, such as a pre-plan, if you like, of things that are going to fail you. In order for you to achieve a more successful goal, you need to be able to write down some things that are actually going to interrupt that goal or interrupt that habit. The list doesn't have to be complicated. It could be simply just some trigger words that remind you of things that could possibly go wrong, such as if you have young children and they have things like sweets and cakes in the house, that you need to make sure that you're not tempted to be able to go into their treat cupboard and raid the cake tin. You need to be able to create a checklist that will actually minimize those problems becoming an actual reality. You need to be able to create a tactic that actually does work, so that 90% of the time you can still go ahead with the plan to create your new habit. And even if failure happens, make a note of it and avoid it for the next time. Another very common thing that I find with my clients is that they are on a diet and things are going really well. But then they say to me, Chris, I've got to go to a restaurant tonight. I don't know what's in the food. It's a good restaurant, so it'll be good food, but I don't know exactly the macros or the calories that's going to be in it. And again, that should be part of your plan, that you are going to sometimes go out with your partner, go out with your wife, go out with your friends, and you are going to not necessarily be able to stick to the diet that you're actually doing, but it's only a one-off occasion. That should be part of your plan. In a sense, you need to be able to have a scenario in your head of the worst possible outcome. And if you can do that, even to some degree, you're definitely going to benefit from it because you can avoid it and move on. Once you have laid out your potential hazards and misfires, you can then make a start on your strategy to creating a new habit. One that has fail-safes and fallbacks. Now, let's go back to the cookie analogy for a moment. Leave it. You travelled to and from your location to mine to receive cookies. And the more frequently you did that journey, the easier the journey became. In this particular instance, because you enjoy the reward that's at the end of the journey that you need to take to be able to get to mine to receive the cookies actually becomes easier. And because it becomes easier, your brain begins to switch off. It doesn't have to think as hard because it doesn't have to remember the journey. It already knows it. It becomes an automated thing. And that's a good thing and also a bad thing. And it's actually something that you need to be able to remember, the reason why you want to create the goal in the first place, the reason why you need to create the habit. What I mean is that if you create a habit that is going to have a negative outcome for you, such as you putting on weight or you're procrastinating or you're just wasting time, that habit will do that for you. That habit will just keep recycling and repeating. It doesn't really matter if it sort of wastes your time or it makes you put on weight or you don't get any further in something that you want to achieve. It has got no tangibility, if that makes sense. But on the same hand, if your need, your want, your end goal is a positive thing, something that you really do want to drive towards, that should be in the forefront of your mind as a thing that actually is going to drive you to keep doing the habit. Now, most of the time, a good habit, a good reward, a positive thing is harder to accomplish because it actually takes more structure. As I've said before, it takes a plan, it takes work. But you should really be striving towards something that does actually make you feel like you're going to achieve something. You feel fulfilled, you feel positive, you feel happy that by the time you do get to the end of that goal, once you reach the top of that mountain, that all that work you've done is for you. So the journey to mine becomes easier and easier because there is a reward at the end. And that's absolutely fine. All that is a metaphor for is cycle or recycle or repeat or repetition. Just keep repeating at the beginning of your habit. It's the only way you're going to break into creating, generating a new habit. And as time goes on, it becomes less forced and a lot more easier. So the more you put in effort to create a new repetition and habit, the more likely it is that you will achieve the goal as a result of your efforts at the beginning of the process. But Chris, I actually hate the idea of having to set a goal and start a process and go through the steps. All I want to do is not fail. Okay, so I'm sure you haven't actually probably asked that question, but you get where I'm coming from. Starting something new is, of course, difficult, especially if the goal is a good one and it is created for the sake of achievement or success.
It's the Yoba series.
But a short-term reward often is the worst thing for us, and a long-term goal is not only harder to achieve, but it's also much easier to fail. So what you need is a form of feedback, be it positive or negative. This feedback will help your performance and give your habit a clear definition as to what it actually means to create a new cycle, what it means to fail and also succeed when you try to stick to these cycles. I suggest that you look for feedback in your actual progress and also how you feel you're progressing towards your habit. And what I mean by that is not like a fucking KPI, because that's just really boring. First, think about your ability to be efficient and effective. Are you both or either one of those things? Such as, are you bad at being effective when you're trying to put a plan together? So, if you're not as effective or as efficient, then perhaps your initial approach should be just to reduce the amount that you expect from yourself at the beginning of your habit. Reduce your expectations to something simple, such as a number of days or possibly just a week. Start the cycle slow. So here's a really easy example. You might be looking to eat something like more protein in your diet, but you're often the type of person who skips their breakfast. And you don't necessarily like eating a large breakfast because you're in a rush. But 2 to 3 times out of your week, so 2 to 3 mornings of that week, you can actually say, well, I'm going to eat some eggs. I'm going to eat 3 eggs for breakfast just because I want to be able to begin that cycle into my habit, but actually I'm finding it quite difficult to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to take very small steps towards creating that cycle for your habit. Then eventually, once you feel comfortable with doing that, then you can possibly start to grow into more meals per week where you're introducing more protein. Now, all of this sounds quite involved and quite complicated, and I completely understand. However, in my experience of working with clients when it comes to weight loss and fitness, if it isn't there already, it isn't going to be there. It's something that you have to develop. It's a skill, or it's something that you just haven't developed naturally, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to find it difficult to be able to begin a habit, and yes, okay, you're going to start creating a plan, you're also trying to create small initiations in that plan, actually trying to start that cycle very, very slowly. So the example that I've given you with someone who's trying to eat more protein in their diet sounds a bit pathetic, but actually for some people, it is actually what they need to be able to do, to be able to generate a new cycle. That's literally what you're trying to do. You're trying to create and generate a cycle which eventually should become a new habit.
It's the Yoba series.
But a short-term reward often is the worst thing for us, and a long-term goal is not only harder to achieve, but it's also much easier to fail. So what you need is a form of feedback, be it positive or negative. This feedback will help your performance and give your habit a clear definition as to what it actually means to create a new cycle, what it means to fail and also succeed when you try to stick to these cycles. I suggest that you look for feedback in your actual progress and also how you feel you're progressing towards your habit. And what I mean by that is not like a fucking KPI, because that's just really boring. First, think about your ability to be efficient and effective. Are you both or either one of those things? Such as, are you bad at being effective when you're trying to put a plan together? So, if you're not as effective or as efficient, then perhaps your initial approach should be just to reduce the amount that you expect from yourself at the beginning of your habit. Reduce your expectations to something simple, such as a number of days or possibly just a week. Start the cycle slow. So here's a really easy example. You might be looking to eat something like more protein in your diet, but you're often the type of person who skips their breakfast. And you don't necessarily like eating a large breakfast because you're in a rush, but 2 to 3 times out of your week, so 2 to 3 mornings of that week, you can actually say, well, I'm going to eat some eggs. I'm going to eat 3 eggs for breakfast just because I want to be able to begin that cycle into my habit. But actually, I'm finding it quite difficult to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to take very small steps towards creating that cycle for your habit. Then eventually, once you feel comfortable with doing that, then you can possibly start to grow into more meals per week where you're introducing more protein. Now, all of this sounds quite involved and quite complicated, and I completely understand. However, in my experience of working with clients when it comes to weight loss and fitness, if it isn't there already, it isn't going to be there. It's something that you have to develop. It's a skill, or it's something that you just haven't developed naturally, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to find it difficult to be able to begin a habit, and yes, okay, you're going to start creating a plan, you're also trying to create small initiations in that plan, actually trying to start that cycle very, very slowly. So the example that I've given you with someone who's trying to eat more protein in their diet sounds a bit pathetic, but actually for some people, it is actually what they need to be able to do, to be able to generate a new cycle. That's literally what you're trying to do. You're trying to create and generate a cycle which eventually should become a new habit. Remember, it's high volume that gets you through the initial sticking points of a new habit. Now, I'll share with you one of my really bad habits. One of my habits is that I would drink quite a lot of coffee during the period of a whole day. The nature of my work is that I start very early. So I start at 6:30, sometimes even before, but I tend to start at 6:30 in the morning with a client. And I can easily go all the way through till 7:30, 8:30, sometimes even 9 o'clock at night. And pretty much I'm working the entire length of that day. So coffee is definitely something that is needed. And I knew to some extent that coffee wasn't a bad thing, but it also in large amounts wasn't a good thing. And because coffee wasn't that calorific, excluding putting lots of sugar and lots of milk into it, you can actually have it black. So it's definitely something that was a pick-me-up, if you like, something that I enjoyed having, but actually started to become slightly detrimental to my day. And what I mean by that is that by the time I'd had my 6th or possibly even my 7th coffee, I'd actually start to feel a little bit sick and quite nauseous, and this was happening on quite a frequent basis. So my habit needed to change, but I like coffee. My goal was to create a limit to how much coffee I could have per day, and that was going to be just 4 cups. And one of the ways that I managed to have just 4 cups was through time. I was making sure that I was only having 2 cups at the beginning of my day in the morning, and I was only having 2 cups in the afternoon and stopping at a certain period, such as 5 or maybe 6 p.m. What I was also making sure not to do is drink coffees back to back, which is obviously a really quick-fire way to accumulate the consumption of caffeine. If I went over the limit of my 4 coffees, let's say that I met up with a client and we had a coffee together, I wasn't necessarily going to beat myself up about it, but I was actually going to make a mental note that I had possibly crept up to 5 or 6 coffees on that day, and that I wasn't being as congruent as I should be. If I'd set myself a goal, I wasn't basically achieving it. And therefore, what I realized is that I don't want to be having something that I'm constantly relying on as a pick-me-up. It is a pick-me-up, it's something that I enjoy, and I know to a certain extent it's definitely something that is good for you, but on the amount that you kind of start to have too much of it, you need to be able to say, am I relying on this? I don't want that. So not being dependent on something such as caffeine was actually a better option for me and pushed me to consume less.
It's the Yo Series.
So you've broken yourself down from this crumbling mess of disdain and dishonesty, and you've built yourself back up. Recreated your whole life around this one habit that is going to change your life forever. Now, this habit is even going to make you more successful and take your career to new heights, leaving the weak in the slow lane and making room for you and your new habit to... Wait a minute. Obviously, I'm joking. Let's cut the crap. So, once you are starting to break into this new habit and you are forming something that is a lot more productive and less of a forced change, what are the benefits of a new habit for you? Well, as the author James Clear explains, habits can become a positive and also a powerful feedback loop that can positively change your behaviours. They can also change your belief system, and potentially they can also change your life. But to be able to grow a habit, they need the right environment to be able to thrive in. A habit isn't just doing the same thing over and over. One habit can lead to a multitude of changes for an individual to thrive and expand an ongoing relationship with effective and productive habits that can change a person's life. The habit that you create will give you feedback that's constantly updating your knowledge. What the habit is also doing is it's also allowing your brain to understand what works for you as an individual and also what doesn't work and what you may need to change or adapt to. What I mean is, a habit can create a belief. And that belief can further develop and also improve your knowledge. This then means that you learn a wider skill set, leading to more successful habits. As a result of that, you will also then start to fine-tune and also remove older habits. This is true because I have experienced this firsthand. Let me tell you a little bit of a personal story. So, as I've probably mentioned to you before, if you've been watching any previous videos, is that I am a personal trainer and also a nutrition coach. And I'm also a physiotherapist, and I combine those three elements to basically make my career. Now, before working in the fitness industry, I had absolutely no idea and no experience of how to run a business. I come from a typical working class background, and with my upbringing, I was taught that money isn't necessarily a sin or it's sinful, but to make a lot of money is kind of not really the done thing. And it wasn't that my parents didn't want me to be successful, it's more the fact that they felt that people who had a lot of wealth or made a lot of money were the type of people that no one wanted to mix with. That being said, when I started to work at this gym as an instructor, I noticed that a lot of the people around me were actually quite wealthy individuals. The demographic of the gym that I work at has actually got a slightly older population, and I work in a slightly more prestigious area of England. Now, coming from a working class background and joining a gym which was slightly more prestigious and the demographic was slightly older, I was noticing that there was quite a lot of money around. People had quite a lot of financially successful businesses, and they were slightly more middle class than my working class background. So obviously my initial thought was, oh, these people kind of like, they're all pompous and they're probably stuck up and they're really demanding and this, that and the other, which was actually a complete falsehood. What I started to realize is that the people that I was working for or working alongside, let's say, were people who'd actually made their own money. They created their own businesses. They had created or generated their own wealth, and they were actually quite highly intelligent. And it was more the fact that they were intelligent and knowledgeable that started to draw me into their circles, if you like. What I started to realize is that by having more knowledge gives you more power, and with more power, that gives you an idea of what you want to do with yourself. So rather than just being an instructor in a gym, like many gyms across the world, I actually wanted to start to train and coach these people because they needed a service, and that service was training and coaching and nutrition advice. And I needed, or didn't realize that I needed, but I did need a little bit more education about the world around me. So with this newfound thirst for knowledge and wanting to acquire or obtain more knowledge, I started to read more, I started to research more, I started to go on more courses to improve my skill set. And through improving my skill set, I could actually start to help more people. And once I started to help more people, I started to advance further along the line. I started to understand that the more people I can help, the more that they can actually help me. They can advance me by giving me their experiences. They can give me things that they have learnt, things that they would suggest to possibly avoid, especially when it comes to running your own business and trying to generate your own money, to try and generate your own wealth. And so my old school mindset of, or my old school belief of money is a negative thing and the working class background, it started to matter less and less. And I started to realize that what I need to do is I need to invest in myself, and I also need to invest in those people around me, because I was realizing that it was actually starting to grow me. Having a working class background, I believe, grounds you. It makes you a very grounded person. It makes you someone who doesn't have high expectations, which I think is a great thing. But also, on the opposite side of the same spectrum, not having high expectations means you're not necessarily always going to work for what you deserve. It also means that you're not necessarily always going to have a strong belief system, because by not having a strong belief system, you don't have to be responsible for having a strong belief system. Like, to have a belief system that's your own actually takes quite a lot of strength, because you have to admit that that's something that you do believe in. That's something that, you manifest an affirmation, if you like. And so when you start to have those things, and then you start to talk to other people who correlate with you, then your belief comes stronger. But at the same time, when you have a belief system, which again is originated from repetition and that habit, when you have a belief system and you talk to someone who doesn't see your point of view, possibly because of their background, possibly because of their own belief system, it may hinder you. And so you start to change your own demographic within your own sort of social circle and the circles that you move within. But there is nothing wrong with the background that you come from. There's nothing wrong with being working class, middle class, whatever, upper class. It doesn't really matter. You may not even consider yourself any type of class. But what I'm saying is that there is a mentality that's very much passed down to you from your family. And I'm not saying whether my parents' mentality was necessarily strong or weak, but it was what it was, and it taught me as much as it could possibly teach me. But I needed to go out and find my own belief system, the things that I wanted to be able to achieve. The things that I wanted weren't to be ashamed of. They were actually things that I should be proud of. And I don't need to rub it in someone else's face, but I do need to be able to express myself that I have a belief system, and that belief system provides me with a better quality of life, but it also provides me with more information. It provides me with more self-esteem. It provides me with more confidence, and it allows me to grow even further. And with that growth comes more knowledge, more money, and so on and so forth. So sorry for that rant. I hope it helps, and if it doesn't, then just ignore me. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Remember to write any comments down below, and also like this video to help the YT algorithm. Also, remember to subscribe. Become the person you imagine yourself to be. Be fit, be healthy, and of course, be a boss bar.
It's the Yo Bossy Weeks.